Number Black ex-detective, voice-over script. The snow fell in thick sheets across the narrow suburban road, each flake adding to the suffocating blanket of white that had already claimed the landscape. Through the storm, a figure emerged, a black man in a torn prison jumpsuit, blood streaking down his face, his trembling hands dragging something metallic behind him. The sound scraped against the frozen ground, a harsh counterpoint to the howling wind. He stopped before a modest two-story house, its windows glowing amber against the storm. From within came a sound that cut through everything else, a young girl's scream. Raw and desperate, the man's breath caught in clouds before him as he raised his fist to the door. No words were spoken, only the wind, the scraping metal, the footsteps crunching through snow, and that terrible scream filled the night air. Marcus Washington had been many things in his 43 years of life. Detective, protector, criminal, prisoner. But tonight, he was something else entirely. A man, racing against time itself. The journey to this moment had begun 3 years earlier when the badge he'd worn with pride for 15 years was stripped away. Replaced with inmate number 78492, the system he'd served had turned on him the moment he'd crossed the line between justice and vengeance. They called it excessive force. He called it the only way to stop monsters when the law protected them instead of their victims. Prison had been its own kind of education. The concrete walls of Millhaven maximum security held men who'd done terrible things. But Marcus had learned that the worst criminals often never saw the inside of a cell. They wore expensive suits, commanded boardrooms, and hid their darkness behind charitable donations and public smiles. In the isolation of his cell, he'd had plenty of time to think about the case that had destroyed him. The one that got away. David Sterling, tech mogul and philanthropist, had been untouchable then. The evidence Marcus had gathered through unconventional means had been thrown out of court. The witnesses had mysteriously recanted their statements. The digital trail had vanished, as if it never existed. Detective Sarah Mitchell was everything Marcus hadn't been: methodical, by the book, patient to a fault. At 32, she'd already made detective first grade, a feat that had taken Marcus twice as long. She believed in the system with an almost religious fervor, trusted that procedure and protocol would always lead to justice. Her desk at the Metropolitan Police Headquarters was organized with military precision, each case file color-coded and cross-referenced. The photo of her 9-year-old daughter Emma sat in a silver frame beside her computer monitor, a constant reminder of why she did this work. Emma had her mother's sharp eyes and determined chin, though she'd inherited her late father's gentle smile. David Sterling stood at the apex of the city's social hierarchy. At 51, he'd built an empire from nothing, or so his carefully crafted biography claimed. His company, Neural Network Solutions, had revolutionized data mining and predictive analytics. Politicians courted his donations. Universities named buildings after him. The media painted him as a visionary who'd overcome a troubled childhood to become one of the country's most successful entrepreneurs. But beneath the veneer of respectability lurked something else entirely. Sterling had discovered that technology could do more than predict behavior. It could control it. The algorithms he'd developed weren't just analyzing data, they were weaponizing it. London in December was a city of shadows and whispers. The fog rolled in from the Thames each evening, turning the streetlights into ghostly halos. The cold seeped through stone and steel, chilling bones and souls alike. In the past 6 months, the city had seen a disturbing pattern emerge. 7 people had gone missing, only to turn up days later, traumatized beyond recognition. 3 others had taken their own lives in ways that defied explanation. The Metropolitan Police had no leads, no patterns, no suspects. The victims seemed random: a banker, a teacher, a street vendor, a student. The only connection was that each had received a mysterious package days before their disappearance, containing nothing but a red USB drive. Marcus had known about Sterling's obsession with control, long before anyone else had connected the dots. 5 years ago, before his fall from grace, he'd investigated a series of suspicious deaths at a tech startup Sterling had acquired. The official report blamed workplace stress and unfortunate coincidences. Marcus had found evidence of something far more sinister: experimental software that could manipulate users through carefully crafted visual and auditory stimuli. But when he tried to build a case, he'd hit wall after wall. Files disappeared. Witnesses moved away without forwarding addresses. His superiors told him to drop it. When he'd refused, When he'd pushed harder, that's when everything had unraveled. The video arrived in Marcus's cell hidden inside a Bible, donated by a prison charity. The guard who delivered it had been paid well to look the other way. The smartphone taped inside the hollowed-out book contained a single video file. Marcus watched it once, then had to stop himself from throwing up. A young woman, barely 20, sat strapped to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Her eyes were forced open by metal clamps. Screens surrounded her, flashing images and symbols at a nauseating pace. Her screams had been muted, but Marcus could see her mouth forming the words "please" and "stop" over and over. Then the camera had panned to show a figure watching from the shadows, David Sterling. Older now but unmistakable. The video ended with text scrolling across the screen. The game continues. Detective Washington. Your move. Marcus had tried the proper channels first. He'd shown the video to the prison warden, explaining the urgency, the danger. The warden had looked at him with barely concealed contempt. A disgraced cop, trying to play hero from behind bars, that's all anyone saw. The guards whispered that he'd finally cracked. That isolation had broken him. They moved him to the psychiatric wing for observation. 3 days of medication he didn't need, and sessions with a psychologist who wouldn't listen, had made one thing clear. If he was going to stop Sterling, he'd have to do it himself. The escape plan had been forming in his mind for months, but the video had accelerated everything. Marcus had made exactly 2 friends in prison: Samuel, a former military engineer doing time for arms dealing, and Jerome, a hacker who'd tried to take down a pharmaceutical company. Samuel had taught him about structural weaknesses in the prison's construction. Jerome had explained how to exploit the electronic locks during shift changes. Neither man had asked why Marcus needed this information. They'd seen the desperation in his eyes and recognized it as something beyond personal freedom. The night he ran was the coldest December had seen in 20 years. The guards were distracted by a fight Jerome had orchestrated in cell block C. The electronic locks experienced a mysterious glitch at exactly 11:43, courtesy of a virus Jerome had been cultivating in the prison's computer system for months. Marcus moved through the shadows like he'd been doing it his whole life. 3 fences, 2 guard towers, and a frozen river stood between him and freedom. He made it through all of them, though the river nearly claimed him. The cold water shocked his system so severely, he almost gave up. Almost let the current take him. But the image of that woman in the chair, Sterling watching, kept him moving. Sarah Mitchell was standing over the body when her phone rang. The victim, a 34-year-old architect named Michael Harrison, had been found in his apartment after neighbors complained about a strange smell. The scene was bizarre. Harrison was seated at his computer, his fingers still on the keyboard, having typed the same phrase over and over for what must have been hours. I am nothing. I am nothing. I am nothing. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment was death by dehydration. He'd simply sat there typing until his body shut down. The call was from dispatch. An escaped prisoner, considered extremely dangerous. Marcus Washington, former detective turned cop killer, though the official record showed the death as accidental, occurring during an unauthorized arrest attempt. Sarah had heard of Washington, of course. His case had been legendary in the department, a cautionary tale about what happened when cops thought they were above the law. But something about the timing bothered her. An escaped cop with a vendetta loose in the city, just as these bizarre cases were piling up. In Sarah's experience, coincidences were usually anything but. The first time Marcus and Sarah's paths crossed was at the scene of the second victim. Marcus had been watching from across the street, hood pulled up against the security cameras, when he saw her arrive. She moved with purpose, directing the crime scene techs with quiet authority. He recognized the type: competent, dedicated, blind to everything outside the yellow tape. She'd never see what was really happening here, never connect the dots that led to Sterling, unless he helped her. The USB drive landed at Sarah's feet with a soft thud. She spun, hand going to her service weapon. But the figure in the alley was already disappearing into the shadows. The drive was red, identical to the ones found near the victims. But this one had a label: watch alone. Trust no one in your department. Your daughter's life depends on it. Sarah should have bagged it as evidence. Should have called for backup. Should have done a dozen things by the book. Instead, she pocketed the drive and walked away from the scene. That night, in the privacy of her home with Emma asleep upstairs, She plugged it into an air-gapped laptop she kept for sensitive materials. The video that played made her blood run cold. It showed Sterling at what appeared to be a board meeting. But the audio had been enhanced to pick up a conversation he was having sotto voce with someone off camera. The beta test is proceeding perfectly. 7 subjects fully responsive to the neural programming. The detective won't be a problem. Mitchell follows orders. She'll investigate exactly what we want her to investigate. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. They knew who she was. They were counting on her predictability. And worst of all, they were right. She had been following the investigation exactly as her superiors had directed, never questioning why certain leads were ignored or why evidence kept disappearing from lockup. The video continued, showing Sterling demonstrating something on his laptop. The screen was barely visible, but Sarah could make out what looked like profiles, dozens of them. Her breath caught when she recognized one. It was Emma's school photo from last year. Marcus watched from the abandoned building across from Sarah's house as the lights went on in every room. He could see her pacing, phone in hand, probably trying to decide who to call, who to trust. He'd taken a massive risk revealing himself to her. But he needed someone on the inside. Someone with access to resources he no longer had. When she finally emerged from the house at 3 a.m. and stood in her backyard, looking up at the sky as if searching for answers, he made his choice. "Don't turn around," he said softly from the shadows. Sarah's hand twitched toward her weapon but stopped. "You watched the video. You're Washington," she said. Her voice steady despite the situation. "You killed a man. I tried to arrest a child trafficker who had paid off half the department. He pulled a knife. The rest is semantics." Marcus stepped closer but remained hidden. "Sterling is going to take your daughter. How do you? Because that's what he does. He takes what people love most and uses it to break them. Those victims? They all had something Sterling wanted: information, access, silence. He's perfecting a system of control, and once he has it, no one will be safe." Sarah turned then, despite his warning, and found herself facing a man who looked nothing like the proud detective from the old newspaper photos. Prison had aged Marcus a decade in 3 years. His eyes, though, remained sharp and focused. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Marcus admitted. "But right now, I'm the only one who knows how Sterling operates. And in about 6 hours, when you don't arrest me like you're supposed to, you'll be as much of an outlaw as I am." The partnership that formed that night was built on necessity rather than trust. Sarah provided intelligence from inside the department, while Marcus worked the shadows, following leads too dangerous or illegal for an active detective to pursue. They met in places the surveillance network couldn't reach: abandoned tube stations, construction sites after midnight, the forgotten corners of the city where even Sterling's all-seeing eye had blind spots. Sterling's next move came faster than either expected. The live stream appeared on the dark web at exactly midnight, 3 days after Marcus's escape. The production quality was professional: multiple camera angles, crisp audio, dramatic lighting. The victim was a young man, maybe 25, strapped to what looked like a medical chair. Sterling's voice, electronically distorted, but still recognizable to those who knew it, provided commentary. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of justice. Our subject today stands accused of theft, specifically stealing proprietary code from his employer. Traditional courts would give him a slap on the wrist, maybe a fine. But you, our audience, can deliver true justice. Vote now. Confession or correction? The choice is yours." The chat erupted with responses, and a counter on the screen showed the votes tallying in real time. When correction won by a landslide, machines around the victim activated. Not to harm him physically, but to bombard him with sounds and images, calibrated to break down mental resistance. Within minutes, the young man was sobbing, begging, confessing to crimes he hadn't committed just to make it stop. Sarah watched the recording in horror. They'd been too late to trace the original stream, but the implications were clear. Sterling wasn't just hurting people, he was turning torture into entertainment, creating a twisted democracy of cruelty. And the production value suggested this wasn't his first show. "We need to find the studio," Marcus said, studying the video frame by frame. "Look at the shadows, the echo pattern in the audio. This is a large space, probably underground, given the concrete walls. There are thousands of potential locations in London alone. Sarah pointed out. "We need more." The break came from an unexpected source. Jerome, Marcus's hacker friend from prison, had managed to get word out through the underground network. He'd found fragments of code on the dark web that matched Sterling's neural programming signatures. The code contained geographical tags, not exact locations, but regions where the software had been tested. Cross-referencing with Sterling's real estate holdings narrowed it down to 3 possible sites. The first location was a bust, an old textile factory that had been genuinely abandoned for years. The second, a former military bunker, showed signs of recent activity but was clearly just a storage facility. It was the third location that made Marcus's instincts scream danger. A decommissioned subway station beneath the financial district, officially sealed but still connected to the power grid. They went in at dawn, when Sterling's surveillance would be at its weakest. The station had been transformed into something from a nightmare. Multiple chambers had been carved out of the old platform areas, each one containing a different setup for breaking down victims. Screens everywhere, speakers hidden in the walls. And in the center of it all, a control room that looked like it belonged in a space agency rather than underground London. Sarah called for backup while Marcus searched for evidence. That's when they heard a faint crying from deeper in the complex. Following the sound led them to a sealed door marked with biohazard warnings. Inside, they found her, Rebecca Martinez, the latest missing person, barely conscious but alive. She'd been there for 72 hours, subjected to Sterling's full program. When she saw them, she started screaming about the voices in her head, the images she couldn't stop seeing. The rescue should have been their victory, but Sterling had been watching. As they emerged from the underground with Rebecca, Sarah's phone buzzed with a video message. It showed Emma at school, playing on the playground, unaware of the camera focused on her. The message was simple. "You took something of mine." Fair is fair. Sarah's world collapsed into a single point of terror. She called the school. But Emma had already been picked up by someone claiming to be sent by her mother. The signature on the release form was perfect. Sarah's own handwriting reproduced flawlessly. Sterling had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Marcus grabbed Sarah before she could run off half-cocked. "This is what he wants. You go charging in, you'll get yourself and Emma killed. We need to think." "Think? He has my daughter? And he wants me. This was always about me. The victims. The games he's been drawing me out. Making me reveal myself." Marcus pulled up the livestream site on his phone. A countdown had appeared. 12 hours until the next show. He'll use Emma to get to both of us. The plan they hatched was desperate and probably suicidal. But it was all they had. Marcus would turn himself in to Sterling, offer himself as a trade for Emma. Sarah would follow with a tactical team, using Marcus's surrender as a distraction. It required trusting the same system that had failed them both. But Emma's life hung in the balance. Sterling's real base of operations wasn't in London at all. The underground station had been a stage, a distraction. His true fortress was a renovated industrial complex in the Scottish Highlands, so remote that satellite surveillance was spotty at best. The building had once manufactured precision instruments for the military. Now it manufactured broken minds. Marcus approached alone, as demanded. The front entrance opened before he could knock, and Sterling's voice echoed from hidden speakers. "Detective Washington. Or, should I say, Mr. Washington. You've lost so much, haven't you? Your badge, your freedom, your dignity. And yet here you are, still trying to play hero." The corridor stretched ahead, lined with screens showing moments from Marcus's life. His graduation from the academy, his first arrest, the night everything went wrong. Sterling had been watching him for years, documenting every success and failure. At the end of the hall, a door opened onto a vast circular room. In the center, 2 chairs faced each other. Emma sat in one, electrodes attached to her temples but apparently unharmed. The other chair was empty, waiting. Sterling emerged from the shadows, looking exactly as he had in the video, immaculate, controlled, monstrous. "Do you know why I chose you, Marcus? Because you're like me. You see the rot in the system, the failure of traditional justice. The only difference is that you tried to fix it from within. I decided to replace it entirely. You're torturing innocent people." "Innocent? There are no innocent people. Only those who haven't been caught yet." My system ensures everyone faces judgment, eventually. Democratic, transparent, final. Sterling gestured to the screens around them, showing thousands of viewers waiting for the next show. They're here for you, Marcus, the cop who went too far. They want to see you punished. Let the girl go. She has nothing to do with this, but she does. Her mother represents everything wrong with modern law enforcement, blind obedience to corrupt institutions. The child needs to learn early that the system won't protect her. Sterling moved to a control panel. But I'm not unreasonable. Sit in the chair, submit to the full program, and I'll let her go. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sat down, let Sterling's assistants attach the restraints and electrodes. Emma's eyes met his, terrified, but trying to be brave. He smiled at her, hoping it looked reassuring. It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Your mom's coming. Sterling laughed. Oh, Marcus, you still don't understand. I know about the tactical team. They're walking into a trap as we speak. The building is rigged with enough psychological warfare technology to reduce trained soldiers to gibbering wrecks. By the time they reach us, if they reach us, they won't even remember their own names. The program began with a whisper, voices speaking directly into Marcus's brain through bone conduction speakers. They told him he was worthless, a failure, a murderer. Images flashed faster than conscious thought could process every mistake he'd ever made, every person he'd failed to save, every moment of weakness magnified and repeated. The chat was voting on what should come next, choosing from a menu of torment Sterling had prepared. But Marcus had spent 3 years in a cage, with nothing but his own thoughts for company. He'd already confronted his demons, made peace with his failures. The program was horrific, but it couldn't show him anything worse than what he'd already shown himself. He focused on Emma, on keeping her attention so she wouldn't look at the screens around them. He told her stories with his eyes, silly faces despite the pain, anything to keep her from seeing what the crowd was voting for. Sarah's team hit the first trap 20 meters into the building. The hallway suddenly filled with strobing lights and subsonic frequencies that induced immediate vertigo. 2 officers collapsed, vomiting. Sarah ordered them back, taking point herself with the few who could still function. They found the second trap, by nearly walking into it, a corridor lined with screens showing their deepest fears, pulled from psychology profiles Sterling had somehow accessed. Sarah saw Emma dead, in dozen different ways. She forced herself forward, eyes closed, following the wall. The control room was deeper than the schematic suggested. Sterling had built down, not out, creating a bunker within a bunker. Each level introduced new psychological obstacles. By the time Sarah's team reached the 3rd sub-level, only she and 2 others remained functional. The rest were being evacuated, minds temporarily shattered by Sterling's defensive systems. In the circular room, the program had been running for an hour. Marcus's nose was bleeding, his body convulsing periodically as the neural stimulation overloaded his nervous system. But he was still conscious, still defiant. The chat was getting frustrated, demanding more extreme measures. Sterling was beginning to realize his perfect system had a flaw. It required the subject to care about their own suffering. Interesting, Sterling mused. You've dissociated completely. Military training? Marcus spat blood. Prison. You learn to go somewhere else when things get bad. Then perhaps we need to bring you back. Sterling moved toward Emma. The program works better with emotional investment. That's when the lights cut out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, but it was enough. Sarah burst through the door, weapon drawn. Sterling smiled, pressing a button on his control panel. Detective Mitchell. Right on time. Did you enjoy the tour? Let them go, Sterling. Or what? You'll shoot me? I'm streaming to 50,000 viewers right now. You kill me on camera. You become the criminal. Your daughter sees you as a murderer. Is that the legacy you want? Sarah's hand trembled. She could see Emma straining against her restraints, Marcus barely holding on. Sterling stood between them, protected by the very system of laws Sarah had sworn to uphold. The perfect trap act and become what she'd always fought against. Or don't act and watch innocent people suffer. Marcus made the choice for her. With Sterling focused on Sarah, he'd loosened his restraints just enough. 3 years of prison workouts had made him stronger than he'd ever been as a cop. He burst from the chair, tackling Sterling before the man could react. They crashed into the control panel, sending sparks flying. The screens around them flickered and died. Sterling was prepared for physical confrontation. He pulled a knife, military grade, and slashed at Marcus's already damaged body. They fought with desperate brutality, two men who'd abandoned all pretense of civilization. Marcus was stronger, but Sterling was fresher, uninjured. The knife found its mark again and again, painting the floor red. Sarah freed Emma, pushing her toward the door. "Run, baby. Get outside and keep running." Then she turned back to the fight. Sterling had Marcus pinned, the knife raised for a killing blow. Sarah's shot was perfect through Sterling's shoulder, spinning him away from Marcus. Not fatal, but enough. Sterling laughed, even as he bled. "You shot me. On camera. Your career is over. My daughter is safe. That's all that matters." But Sterling wasn't finished. He crawled toward a second panel, a failsafe he'd installed for exactly this scenario. "If I can't have my kingdom, no one can." His finger found the button just as Marcus reached him. The building's self-destruct wasn't explosives. Sterling was too sophisticated for that. Instead, it released years of concentrated psychological warfare programming through every speaker and screen simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Reality seemed to fracture. Up became down, walls breathed, shadows gained substance. It was designed to permanently break anyone exposed to it for more than a few minutes. Marcus grabbed Sterling, holding him in place as the program washed over them. "You want to play God? Fine. Let's see how you handle your own medicine." Sterling's eyes went wide as his own creation turned against him. The program had been calibrated for maximum effect, and without the protection of the control room, he was as vulnerable as anyone. He started screaming, begging Marcus to let him go, to turn it off. But Marcus held on, even as his own mind began to fragment. Sarah grabbed them both, dragging them toward the exit. The building was collapsing into chaos. Sterling's assistants fleeing in panic. Some were laughing hysterically, others sobbing, all of them broken by their master's final weapon. Sarah's training kept her focused. Get to the exit. Get to safety. Save who she could. They emerged into Scottish winter dawn, the cold air like a slap of sanity after the madness inside. Emma was there with the tactical team, wrapped in a thermal blanket. She ran to her mother, and they held each other as if the world might end if they let go. Marcus collapsed in the snow, Sterling still in his grip. The tech mogul had gone silent, his eyes vacant, lost somewhere in the nightmare he'd created. The aftermath was messier than any of them could have predicted. The live stream had captured everything, spreading across the internet before any government could suppress it. 50,000 people had watched a vigilante detective and a by-the-book cop take down one of the country's most powerful men. The debate raged for weeks. Were they heroes or criminals? Had they saved lives or subverted justice? Marcus survived his injuries, barely. 3 surgeries and 2 months of recovery left him scarred but functional. The courts didn't know what to do with him. He'd escaped from prison, technically kidnapped Sterling, and participated in what some called torture. But he'd also exposed a criminal network that had claimed dozens of victims. In the end, they offered him a deal: finish his original sentence, then work with a special task force investigating dark web crimes. It wasn't freedom, but it was purpose. Sarah kept her badge, though she was transferred to a new department, far from her old precinct. The powers that Sterling had compromised were too embedded to remove entirely, but her actions had started a purge that would continue for years. She and Emma moved to a smaller city, somewhere Sterling's shadow had never reached. They visited Marcus once a month, Emma insisting on showing him her school projects and soccer trophies. Sterling himself became a ward of the state, his mind shattered beyond repair. The psychiatrist said he experienced reality in fragments now, jumping between moments of his life without context or continuity. Sometimes he was a child again, innocent and curious. Other times he was in his chamber, running endless shows for an audience that no longer existed. He would never stand trial, never face traditional justice. He'd become trapped in a prison of his own making, one with no walls but no escape. The technology Sterling had developed was classified and supposedly destroyed, though everyone involved knew that was a comfortable lie. Governments and corporations around the world had seen its potential. The arms race had already begun. Just quietly, in laboratories, and black sites, where ethics were abstract concepts. Marcus's new role would be to hunt down these operations, to prevent other Sterlings from emerging. It was a war that couldn't be won, only fought. On a cold February morning, Marcus stood outside the facility where Sterling was held. Through the reinforced window, he could see the man who'd destroyed so many lives. Sterling was sitting at a table, moving chess pieces randomly on a board, playing a game only he understood. For a moment, their eyes met. Sterling smiled, the expression empty of recognition or meaning, then returned to his meaningless game. Marcus turned away, walking back toward the car where Sarah waited. She'd driven up specially, said she had news. There'd been another incident, another predator using technology to hunt victims. The work never ended. Evil simply adapted, found new tools, new methods. But so did those who fought it. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked as he got in the car. Marcus looked back at the facility one last time. Somewhere in there, a monster sat trapped in his own mind. Out here, dozens more roamed free. The badge might be gone, the official authority stripped away, but the mission remained. Protect the innocent. Stop the predators. Stand between the darkness and the light. "I've been ready my whole life," he said. As they drove away, snow began to fall again, covering the world in temporary white. It would melt, as it always did, revealing the darkness beneath. But for now, in this moment, the world looked clean and new. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself believe, just for a moment, that they could make a difference, that the monsters could be stopped, that justice, however imperfect, would prevail. The road stretched ahead, leading back to the city and the work that waited. Sarah turned on the radio. Some pop song Emma liked filling the car. It was absurdly normal after everything they'd been through. Marcus found himself humming along, surprising them both. They laughed, the sound bright against the winter morning. Behind them, the facility disappeared into the snow and mist. Sterling remained at his chessboard, moving pieces in patterns that meant nothing to anyone but him. The game he'd started continued, but the players had changed. And somewhere in the city, in buildings with too many cameras and servers that never slept, other games were beginning. The war between control and freedom, security and privacy, justice and vengeance, would continue long after all of them were gone. But that was tomorrow's fight. Today, Marcus Washington and Sarah Mitchell drove through the snow toward home, toward Emma, toward something resembling peace. They'd saved who they could, stopped who they could. In a world of systems and algorithms, they'd proven that individual choice still mattered, that one person could still make a difference. The snow kept falling, covering their tracks, hiding their path. But they knew where they'd been and where they were going. That was enough. It had to be. In the rear-view mirror, the past receded into white nothing. Ahead, the future waited. Uncertain, but unwritten. Marcus opened his eyes as the city skyline appeared through the storm. Somewhere out there, someone needed help. Someone was crying out against the darkness. And despite everything, the scars, the losses, the price paid, he would answer. Not because he had to anymore, but because he chose to. Because that's what heroes did, badge or no badge. They stood up, they fought back, and they never, ever gave up. The car disappeared into the city, swallowed by the storm and the streets and the endless human drama of London. Behind them, the snow covered everything, making the world new again, if only for a moment. And in that moment, anything was possible. Even justice, even redemption, even hope.